This is Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash, a podcast about everything that happens after Git Push. Ship It is brought to you by Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your apps close to your users all around the world. Learn how at Fly.io.
Okay, friends, I'm here with Annie Sexton over at Fly. Annie, you know we use Fly here at Changelog. We love Fly. It is such an awesome platform, and we love building on it. But for those who don't know much about Fly, what's special about building on Fly?
Fly gives you a lot of flexibility, like a lot of flexibility on multiple fronts. And on top of that, you get, so I've talked a lot about the networking, and that's obviously one thing, but there's various data stores that we partner with that are really easy to use. Actually, one of my favorite partners is Tigris. I can't say enough good things about them when it comes to object storage. I never in my life thought I would have so many opinions about object storage, but I do now. Tigris is a partner of Fly, and it's S3 compatible object storage that basically seems like it's a CDN, but is not. It's basically object storage that's globally distributed without needing to actually set up a CDN at all. It's like automatically distributed around the world. And it's also incredibly easy to use and set up. Like creating a bucket is literally one command. So it's partners like that that I think are this sort of extra icing on top of Fly that really makes it sort of the platform that has everything that you need.
So we use Tigris here at Changelog. Are they built on top of Fly? Is this one of those examples of being able to build on Fly?
Yeah, so Tigris is built on top of Fly's infrastructure, and that's what allows it to be globally distributed. I do have a video on this, but basically the way it works is whenever, like let's say a user uploads an asset to a particular bucket, well, that gets uploaded directly to the region closest to the user. Whereas with a CDN, there's sort of like a centralized place where assets need to get copied to, and then eventually they get sort of trickled out to all of the different global locations. Whereas with Tigris, the moment you upload something, it's available in that region instantly. And then it's eventually cached in all the other regions as well as it's requested. In fact, with Tigris, you don't even have to select which regions things are stored in. You just get these regions for free. And then on top of that, it is so much easier to work with. I feel like the way they manage permissions, the way they handle bucket creation, making things public or private is just so much simpler than other solutions. And the good news is that you don't actually need to change your code if you're already using S3. It's S3 compatible, so like whatever SDK you're using is probably just fine. And all you got to do is update the credentials. So it's super easy.
Very cool. Thanks, Annie. So Fly has everything you need. Over 3 million applications, including ours, here at Changelog. Multiple applications have launched on Fly. Boosted by global Anycast load balancing, zero configuration private networking, hardware isolation, instant WireGuard VPN connections, push button deployments that scale to thousands of instances. It's all there for you right now. Deploy your app in 5 minutes. Go to fly.io. Again, fly.io.
Hello and welcome to Ship It, the podcast all about what happens after you Git push. I'm your host, Justin Garrison, and with me, as always, is Autumn Nash. She's not here right now. We've been doing these shorter intros just to kind of intro the person we're interviewing. I think we're going to drop these in a little bit, and we're just going to do proper intros with everyone in future shows. But we haven't been doing that, and we've already been recording some of these shows. So I'm just going to introduce it. Autumn's here on the interview, and we also have Jorge Castro. And George created a project called uBlue, which is a foundation for a bunch of Linux distros based on Fedora Silverblue. We go into it in depth. If you don't know what any of that is, George is very careful to call Bluefin and Bazzite not distros because they're flavors of Fedora Silverblue. They're basically just more opinionated Linux distros. I have been using Bluefin on my developer desktop for over a year now. I have been using Bazzite on my Steam Deck for probably the same amount of time. I love them both. I think they're great projects. They have Chrome OS-ified the Linux distro for me, and that's been wonderful. So if you want to learn more about it, stick around for the interview with George and check out the links in the show notes. Hello and welcome to the show, Jorge Castro. George is part of developer relations with the CNCF or the Linux Foundation, one and the same for some parts. George, but that's not what we're going to talk about. Today we're talking about your side project, right? This thing that you started and now it's taken over a lot of things, and I love it. I've been using it for a year. Why don't you tell us about uBlue?
A year, and we are going to bring up the cloud native thing at the end because that's like the mission part at the end.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the nerd stuff first. Yeah. So me and some friends started Universal Blue, which is an umbrella organization that publishes Bazite and Project Bluefin, which are operating systems for your computer. Bazite is for gamers, for handhelds, and all the fun stuff, like the new Asus ROG Ally you can run on your Steam Deck. You can run on HCPC, and it's got this like cool big picture mode style thing. And then Project Bluefin was my passion project, which is originally what I started with, which is I wanted to make the world's greatest Linux workstation for people like us. And distros weren't really filling that need. And then at some point, Fedora gained the capability to map it all with cloud native tools. And that made it really easy for me. And that helped me get people like you, Justin, to help me finish it out and kind of build what we want. And now we are on year 3. We're about to make a release again this fall, and things are going great. We're about to hit 20 million pulls on our images. So pretty happy about that. And yeah, that's what brings me here.
That's awesome. And I remember the first time you told me about it, you came up, you showed me just like, you told me the domain first, right? Like it's the letter U, blue, the color, and .it. It was like the very first domain that you're like, you blew it. And I was like, yeah, you're going to blow it if you like create a new distro. What are you doing? Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, well, for getting domains is hard. And at the time, it's like, will this even work? I don't know. So you point at a laptop and you say, you blew that one. Like you blew it. Like point at your ThinkPad. So it was actually intended to be a slug. And then one day when we actually realized that the model would work, because you had to figure out if the model is going to work in the first place before like making a product, right? And once the model started to work, it became more clear that it wasn't going to be a weekend project anymore. It originally was a weekend project, and now we're on year 3.
Describe the model. Describe what you mean by like you have to make that side of it.
Yeah, so the model basically is Red Hat and Fedora had this thing called RPM OS tree, which I don't really want to get into. It's basically just an operating system in like a Git-like structure. So imagine that your entire operating system is just in Git.
I always describe people like go to the root of your file system, do git init, and git add all. And
Exactly.
that is basically, and then you go check out that in another folder and you say, oh, this one's main and that one's like whatever branch you're on, right? Like that's basically RPOS tree in a nutshell.
Right. So what's cool about that is like the entire OS in there, the kernel, like all that stuff. So it was around for a while. Like people use it in embedded systems and stuff. And you know, it was neat, but it was decidedly niche, right? There's always that bit of like embedded tech where you're like, well, that's pretty cool. I can't really use that anywhere else. And then at some point at KubeCon, I ran into Colin with the author, Colin Walters, at a KubeCon. He goes, hey, what do you think about this? I made it so you could use all that stuff, but you can model it inside a Docker file. So your Docker, you just make a Docker file, and then you say from Fedora, and then you do RPM OS tree install your packages, and then you added a few extra commands. There's like a few extra differences, and an operating system came out. I was like, really? That's weird. So I did that. I added, a different text editor, and then I made a copy statement like you would in a normal container, except I copied a wallpaper over, and I put that in GitHub in a GitHub action, and some friends helped me, and an operating system container came out. It was like 8 gigs, right? Because it has a kernel, it has the full system. And I built it in GitHub, and then GitHub shoves it into the GitHub registry. And then my laptop pulls from it as if it was pulling from like your app repository, right? So it gives, now anyone who can make a Docker file can customize operating systems. And it took us, like at first, usually when you talk to server people, you're like, oh man, I know exactly what I'm going to make, right? So like, I don't think that was the tough sell, right? But I always kind of like to do things the hard way. You know, it's like, hey, wait a minute. I want to make a Linux desktop with this, right? Because Linux desktops are still kind of traditionally package-based. they never really went through their cloud native journey. So like when you're used to working with like cloud native tech and you go back to Linux distro, it's like literally going back to the 90s, it feels like sometimes, right? But there's a lot of good stuff there. So this allowed us to basically take a lot of the good stuff that we love about Linux distros, but shove it into a cloud native model that now I can use all the tools that I have in GitHub. So I spent about a decade at Canonical building Ubuntu and Ubuntu server. And the amount of infrastructure it took back then to make an operating system was immense. You had to build Launchpad, right? Which is like before GitHub, everyone was trying to make one of these, right? And the infrastructure it takes to make an operating system and all that stuff is like really hard. But now, because Fedora just made it that it's just a Docker file, I can use the same tools and stuff that people just use to make their Node app containers, except I could put an operating system in there. So that's what we did. We started publishing base images. And then people like Kyle came along and said, it'd be really cool if I were to stick gaming stuff in there, because trying to get gaming on Linux is like hard. There's like multiple configurations, tons of distros. It's just, you've all used Linux before. It's just a hot mess, So the pattern really enables what we were able to do at work with cloud native, which is why I still kind of mentioned the cloud native stuff. Is it lets distribution people who like don't want to deal with RPMs and like all this low level stuff. You let Fedora and the distros handle that. And then we handle the customization bits, the kind of SRE style things in the same way that like your developers develop the app and whatnot. And then at some point that gets Git pushed, and then there's a container, and then there's an ops team that you work together with to get that to production. And those are the patterns that I wanted to bring to the Linux desktop, because the value isn't actually in the artifact. It's the fact that you can gather experts around a Git repo, right? And apply that to your workstation so that when I fire up my VS Code, I just want my VS Code to be like the good one. So Brian Kettleson, who's on the team, when we were hanging out, I was like, show me your VS Code set. You ever get to know someone, and you're like, show me your VS Code setup.
Once you know them enough, you're like, hey, what's your vimRC?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're doing the nerd stuff, right? And then you're like, wow, let me nick this, let me nick that. Let me put this in my toolkit. Let me introduce some tools to you. Like I love Atuin is one of my favorite tools, which is a shell history thing. And we just started to collect all these little like nerd tools or whatever. And it's like, well, why don't distros ship this out of the box? Well, it's an opinion, right? So if we can make a thing, I made a thing that's called Project Bluefin. This is going to be Linux for the rest of us. And we're going to have the cool Linux tools. Brian's VS Code config is basically what we ship. With the dev containers and already installed, they're like ready to go. So we wanted to kind of prove that the same level of efficiency and stuff that you get from cloud, you can bring to like your workstation and then just have it set up out of the box.
See, I love that so much because I have a Mac and I run like Linux on like a dev desktop, but I use like my Mac for everything else because I don't want to deal with like how you said it's like going back to the 90s sometimes. So now I'm just like, I could run Linux all the time if I use Bluefin. That'd be cool.
Now, how much of that is like you're shipping opinions?
Yeah.
Right. Like one of the best things that people like is like, oh, look at all this choice we have on Linux, right? Linux desktop. Like I could pick anything I want. And in this case, you're like, well, no, we're just going to give you what we think works well, especially in this sort of like, I don't want to say cloud native space, but like if you're familiar with containers and you're doing that sort of stuff, this might fit your model better than something like Nix, right? Because like Nix has its own set of opinions and how to manage things. And if you're doing Docker files on top of Nix, like you have two layers of this is more opinions and more complex. Sometimes you have to kind of switch your model around how things work.
Yeah. It's like pick your Linux, especially traditional Linux. Like I grew up on traditional Linux, right? Like I grew up on Enlightenment and Window Maker and stuff, right?
Oh, man, I loved Enlightenment.
And in the early days, when you're very first getting started, you're very much focused on, I'm going to make the perfect thing for me. It's going to have like,
no, man, I was getting my Wi-Fi drivers. That's what I was focused on.
Well, also that. Yeah. Okay. So after the first 2 years of getting the right hardware,
Xconfig and Wi-Fi drivers. That's it.
So when we are growing up, though, it is all about like finding your perfect setup, right? And we grow up seeing all these like Linux screenshots and the individual. It's all about the individualism, right? It's like
Compiz, Barrel, that stuff is like that,
right? You want to express yourself, right? And Linux is like all the other kids have their traditional desktops. Your coworker has his golden image from work IT or whatever, and your Linux is like your hot rod, right? It's like it becomes part of your identity, right? But I think as we found as we got older and the open source movement gets, new people are coming in, people are cycling out. Now that now that the real long-term sustainability is our issue, is at some point you're like, okay, who's got the best one of these?
Yeah.
Brian, okay, we're going to start with you.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're going to make parameters for all of the things that we want an opinion on that we feel is important. But let's go into it saying that 90% of the stuff we're just going to manage out of our lives. Right. Like, so for us with Bluefin, it's like, you like GNOME, but you want Ubuntu style GNOME, sort of like the 1990s X-Men. I like to think of old Ubuntu as like the 90s X-Men.
I love that.
Where it's like, that's my X-Men, right? Like that's the X-Men I identify with the most, right? And like, it's the same way with technology, right? Because it's the same, but it's also different. So it's like, what multiverse of your favorite superheroes? Did you have that with Star Wars? Like what era is your favorite? Sports teams or whatever. So like, we're like, if you grew up in this kind of classic Ubuntu era, 10.04-ish, that's kind of awesome for you, but you're looking for something more modern, something more standards-based, something that really what I try to do, especially with Bluefin DX, is set people up for success as like pretend when they open that laptop and there's Bluefin on it, that they're at a workshop learning their first deployment of something.
I was just going to say that it makes it more accessible. And then you can learn to change all of those different opinions as you go on. But I feel like there's like, okay, if you took like, I don't know, different students that we teach at Mills Fast Coders or different kids, and there's some people who really want to be in those weeds and they really want to change everything and learn every little piece. And then there's some people where they're going to get frustrated and like not want to even try, and like if it's so down in the weeds. So it's like, that's really cool that you're giving people the options and making it more accessible for maybe somebody who wants to like get started. Also, sometimes, when you want to like at work, I want all the different like, opinions and stuff. But when you're at home and you're using your like laptop and you want to do something fun, dude, I just want it to work. And then I want to change what I want it to change. So like,
well, and like as a user of both these products, like I installed Bazite on my Steam Deck more than a year ago now. And like, I haven't changed anything. Like, it's just like, I just keep doing updates, and my son runs it on his Steam Deck and it's his main computer. Like that's his school computer, but he also games on it. It's just like, yeah, it's just Bazite. And because you get all the Flatpak stuff, you get the things that Steam didn't really integrate well into SteamOS, because the desktop environment was definitely an afterthought. It was like, yeah, you could also do that other stuff if you wanted to, but you probably don't want to. And then on my desktop with Bluefin, when you told me there was like an NVIDIA build of it, where it's just like, oh yeah, I just want the developer NVIDIA. I was just like, I just rebased off of it basically, right? It was like a rebase reboot. And I'm like, wait, I have NVIDIA now? Like, hold on a second. Like what? I didn't go through any install I didn't have to like do all this. Like, no, it's
like building the module locally on your computer. It just doesn't make sense. It's very interesting to me, because if you were to come out with a traditional Linux desktop today, it'd be the worst product and people would call you out on it, but it's been around for so long.
Yeah.
So, the idea that like you have, let's say your Linux distribution has 100,000 NVIDIA users, and you're expecting 100,000 people, computers of different manufacturers, to all compile a kernel module to load a binary driver, and you have 100 shots at it. What are the chances you're going to get 100 out of 100? Keeping in mind that sometimes you don't even know it's happening, and you might turn off your computer and it absolutely fails, right? Whereas the cloud native model is like, well, let's build it one place in CI, and if it passes, it passes. If it breaks,
don't promote. Like,
yeah,
no one
don't
gets
promote.
It.
Exactly.
What is that infrastructure? Like, where are all the builds taking place? Like, how are you distributing this? Like, this is a Linux distro, like you said. Distributing Ubuntu like took a lot of services and products, and now you have a modern Linux distro. Like, what are you doing with it?
Everything's in GitHub. You can run your own personal image out of GitHub as well. We pay because we want more concurrent builders, so it costs about $70 to run the entire project, and we take in a month, and we take in about $80 in donations. So for me, that's like the perfect, just enough budget over in case there's like an emergency. So like we actually went into it with we don't want to make infrastructure, because one of the things I did learn about making a Linux distribution is it's hard, and everyone falls into the trap, right? Oh, we're going to need our own web server. We're going to need our own mirrors. We're going to need our own this. We're going to need our own that. Where our mentality was like, let's leverage as much SaaS as we can to get what we need done. And then our ISOs are served by Cloudflare, which is R2, and the cost is fantastic.
$0 egress. Yep.
I think we pay $8 a month for all of Bluefin's ISOs. Like, it's such a great deal. And a lot of these companies, they have fantastic open source programs that we take advantage of, which, we try to do our part to recognize when companies are supporting open source. So Discourse, that runs our forum, has just a great open source program for communities that meet a certain size. You don't just get it right away, you got to earn it. So and that really helped us. It kind of gave us, when we reach a certain size, we know that we'll be able to leverage these kinds of things. So we really do try to run it as much as possible with SaaS and things like that. That helps us keep it lean because it does take a lot of effort to run a Linux distro. And we want to leverage as much goodness from Fedora, but we want to give our users what they want in the most efficient way possible. We could definitely set up a lot of infrastructure. We say no to ourselves all the time. Equinix gave us a really nice ARM builder, and it was just awesome. But trying to get bare metal up and running for your own build. At some point, we're like, okay, we're just going to wait for GitHub runners.
Yeah. I feel like that's working smarter, not harder sometimes, because sometimes you get so into the infrastructure and doing everything yourself that it takes away from building the main product that you want to build. And you can always go build the infrastructure later if you wanted to.
Right.
Well, and by keeping all of this SaaS based, like what's the process for me to go make my own fork or build of Bazite, right? Like you can just do that because I don't need to have a dedicated runner. Like I'm still using GitHub for that.
Yeah. So in the old days, you'd have to fork all of Bazite and then keeping up with that thing. Not awesome. These days we have an image template that we made that literally says from, and then we give you commented out all the sections, and then you would do Bazite.
That's smart.
And then you would add the packages that you want. Removing packages is kind of weird because it is a layered.
Because it's Git.
No, because it's an OCI container, right? So right. If I give you Bazite,
popping
because that's a layer up, right? You can't remove things. However, we have this fella Antheus has been figuring out a rechunker that will go back and reorganize all the layers and remove all the stuff that you're not using to get the image size down. So the image size and the updates are still not optimized, but Red Hat is productizing this for their enterprise stuff. So as they figure that out, we get the advantages because their RHEL AI containers are like 300 gigs or something silly like that. And we think Bazite is bloated because it's 20. So that again, by using things like OCI containers, we could just leverage existing tools, optimization tools. Like on your OS image, you could run Gripe, the tool that you use to find the CVE vulnerabilities in your app containers. You can run that on your OS container, and it's smart enough to give you all of the versions of the packages and stuff. They did a really good job normalizing the OS and what it would look like in a container, in my opinion, which leads to our success.
That's really cool. Just the way that you took all these different building blocks and used them together. It's like my favorite part of programming. It's like building Legos, but with computers.
Yeah.
And this is the first distro that I've ever seen that encouraged you to go make a fork, right? Because the fork is not maintenance for me. Right. It's not like, oh, you have to go maintain this whole thing. It's like, no, I can just keep pulling upstream, rebuild it, and I can rebase off of my own published image with the 10 or 15 packages that I want. And then I pull them in and I'm staying one level behind what upstream is.
Yeah. And really the only maintenance is, you'll find this out, is GitHub. If you don't make a Git commit to your repository and you're running actions, if you don't make a commit, it assumes that you abandon it and gives you a warning, we're going to turn off your action off, which would actually turn off your OS. But yeah, literally, other than checking in every once in a while to see how your build is doing, it is very low maintenance. Although what we are finding is initially, I think because people were also learning how to use a Linux in this manner instead of their traditional way, I think a lot of people go into it thinking that they need to make a custom image. And a lot of people do follow that pattern. But what we did find is a lot of people do end up, even after you do your own image, be like, wow, I'd rather have someone else do this anyway. And as we bring in new tools, it alleviates a lot of the need to do a custom image. So getting Homebrew, I think, in there was a huge win. I know a lot of Linux traditionalists don't like Homebrew, but
they can stay in their old school. I've been using Homebrew for, 4 or 5 years on Linux, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. And then for us, because we're obviously, with Bluefin especially, I'm going after Mac people, right? Especially our open source people.
You are going to convert this Mac person because I'm sitting here this sounds amazing. This is all the part. for instance, some people really get into that, like wanting to do all the really lower level stuff. I was a kid who wanted to like customize things, but at a different level. So you're speaking to like, I feel like you're speaking to so many different people and making it like such a big audience, because now you get to choose the level of abstraction of, you know, getting to pick those things. So like, to me, like this sounds great for development and for personal, because I get to pick where I'm like, you know, if I just want to do something and I want it to work, it does that. When I want to customize it, it does that. And it gives me all the pluses of Linux. So like,
Yeah,
you're converting me as a user, right here.
You're right. Like your brew file just works, right? You just install it. Yeah.
Yeah. The GUIs don't. One of the things I want to do, if there's any Rails nerds or Ruby nerds out there, is I would love to have a cask that lets you use a brew file. And, you know, on a Mac, it installs the Mac GUI applications. I would love a cask for Linux that would let me define my Flatpak applications in a brew file so that I can just brew install Firefox and it will get the right Flatpak. I need a little bit of duct tape there if anyone's interesting. These are the kinds of little things that you're going to find where like you're like, oh yeah, brew in Linux sounds amazing. But then you're also missing a few things, and that's...
But I don't think that's not missing something that would be like a huge blocker, because I think a lot of people want to get into Linux, but sometimes they're a little it can be a little intimidating sometimes.
Well, and there's too much choice, right? Like all of the benefits of all that choice is paralyzing.
Sometimes you just want to start, you know, and I think this is a great way to bridge that gap and to give people the start, but to still like, you can learn and you can go and look and, you know, experiment, but it's enough to get you started.
What's up, friends? I'm here with Cal Carberry, co-founder and CTO at Coder.com. So Coder.com is a cloud development environment, a CDE, and you run on all the clouds, AWS, Azure, GCP, you run on-prem, and you're no stranger to competition, right? The competition out there is well known, but what shocks you, what surprises you about the state of cloud development environments and how developers are leveraging them?
You know, it actually shocked me. The majority of our largest provision customers do not use containers with their development environments. They actually use VMs on like GCP, AWS, or some kind of mixture of them. One of the largest auto manufacturers, they have like a little bit over 1,000 devs that use Coder every day, and they use a mixture of Azure, AWS, and GCP.
So I've used Docker, I've used VMs, but take me into the technical details. What is it that's different between a VM and running something in Docker?
Kind of like all existing solutions, like kind of our competitors in the market, all really have a container-based approach where you build like a Docker container and developers work inside of that. And it faces a couple limitations because, you know, Adam, like if, you know, on your machine right now, 100% you're not working inside of a Docker container doing this discussion, right? It's just very different. So there's a lot of software expectations that actually don't really work inside of a container. An example is a customer of ours is Square, and they do stuff with a payment terminal. And so they need essentially like hardware accelerated Android. That is just really finicky to get working in a container. You totally can pass dev KVM into a container and get hardware accelerated virtualization, but it's a little trickier and a little more janky. And so they'd rather just be like, no, the simple thing is give everyone a VM. There's no point to change the way that we work in entirety to do some weird virtualization jank. It just makes more sense to give them a VM that we know works.
Well, it might be time to consider a cloud development environment. And open source is awesome, and Coder is fully open source. You can go to Coder.com, get a demo, or try it right now, or even start a 30-day trial of Coder Enterprise. Once again, Coder.com, that's CODER.com, Coder.com.
Is your sticker the one with the little raptor on it?
Little dinosaur. Yeah.
Oh my God. My kids are obsessed. Those stickers are all over my house. Justin gave them stickers and they're like...
Oh, I'll bring you some. We're getting new dinosaurs and stuff. I work with paleo artists because You know, that's the whole dinosaur evolution thing. And
We're about to be like your biggest customer because I want to try your product and my kids are obsessed. Like they're all over their little laptops. They got their first Chromebooks this year and it's all over their iPads and they love your stickers.
that is so validating. Thank you. I can't wait to tell the art.
I just want you to know that they're little dinosauraholics and tech nerds and they love your stuff.
Yeah, I've got a whole species.
Oh, that's a new one. That's so good.
Yeah, this was called Markovinator. This one is this was actually.
This is an audio show, so we can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I got one called Carl. This is on the website. This is the big
website.
towering one.
Do you have like an Instagram or anything?
No, but you can buy them directly from the artist. I'll make sure I send you all links and things like that. Because
if you guys ever make shirts, I just want you to know I have tiny models and I will buy the shirts because like they because they got their like each of them got like for their birthday their own little like Chromebooks, and you know how like my computer laptop has so many stickers. So then as soon as we got back from Scale, they started putting all the GitHub stickers and all the like Bluefin stickers. So they're like so into it. They think they're like baby Debs now. It's adorable.
Not to do any spoilers, but I do have a plan like bringing my kid to Scale, and then there's like little dinosaurs and stuff, and they got their
My son's going to be there next year.
I'm bringing my kids too. Like we're rolling up with a gang of kids because I'm bringing my kids. Carrie's bringing her kids. We're trying to get the 2 college students to
Scale
give
is
talks.
the best place for families, like the best conference for. Yeah.
And their dad lives in California, so I'm gonna be like, okay, come for one day, and then I'm gonna do fun nerd stuff with my friends.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like, I'm so excited.
FYI, just aside too, anyone that's interested in Scale, the CFP opened for Scale like last week or something like that. So you can go, so if you want to submit a talk, it's a great first time place to speak because it's a small community conference. There's not a lot of pressure.
It is the most welcoming, kind. You can ask questions. Nobody acts like you're stupid for asking questions. Like it's like nerd spring break over there. Okay. Like I have never thoroughly enjoyed a conference. Like it's not fancy, but it is like all the good parts of just like.
Yeah. And it's affordable.
Yes.
Right? It's a community 100%. Thing. It's like, it's like $100 or something like that for, it's in Pasadena in March.
Yeah.
But it's accessible too. Do you know how exciting it is to be like a mom who's a software engineer? People are always like, you can't be a mom and a software engineer. I walked up, there were babies in talks. Like people brought their kids. Like you get to bring your whole self to Scale. You know what I mean? And I love that. Also, if you guys need any help, I'll totally jump on like helping this year too. I'm about to like submit my talk. I'm going to submit my Barbie CICD talk to Scale this year.
That would be amazing. Yeah, the team's going to try to go to Scale. A bunch of them went last year. But I wasn't able to go. So this year I'm fighting to go.
Okay, but we need like cool we need cool shirts because Meta's like sweatshirts last year were fire and I'm so jealous. Like we need to make some
It's so hard to do good swag because we could do shirts. It's literally the last thing I'm putting it off because like I don't want to mess up the opportunity with the dinosaur to come out with a bummer shirt, you know?
But you have you have dinosaurs in Linux, like
I know,
fire.
I've got the ingredients.
Yes,
I'm waiting for the right vendor, and it's just one of those things that we have to buckle down and doing it, you know. But like the day job is.
I don't know if we're gonna ever get on Meta's level. Like they have Linux like sweatshirts, and there's
the tux inside the hood.
Yeah, there's penguins inside the hood, like fire.
Don't worry. See, I have access to really, really good marketing people who've already given me the ideas.
Dinosaurs in the hood. Can we just pretend?
No. We're talking about the hoodie, but it's the raptor, and then she's got a tail in the back. You know, the feather tail, the fan tail. You gotta have that.
Goodness, can I work there? Hire me. Like, can I just volunteer?
Yeah. See, you maybe give the surprise way in the pockets. What you do is you put the little raptor claws are in the pockets.
Man.
You are selling a big
That's
sell.
Like a $300 hoodie right there.
I'll pay for that though.
Drew's like, how you pay? Drew, who's like the vendor who makes all the KubeCon swag. He's like, what CNCF project is this for? Anyway, I was like, hey man, look, I'm just trying to get a ballpark on what you do. And I was like, man, this is going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Look, my kid and me, like we will be your first customers and like we will walk around Scale looking like raptors. It'll be great.
Oh, I know. We'll figure it out. Yeah, the kids love it. And it also, I think it teaches, one of the things about the project is like, we really want to teach people the on-ramp to go into the profession, right? Because Scale is relatively cheap, right? And for a lot of enthusiasts, KubeCon is not, right? Like for a lot of people, unless their employers work, they can't go to KubeCon. They can't go to OSS Summit, you know?
Not just that, but if you're a single mom like me, you can't take your kids to KubeCon and all these other places.
Right. Actually, we at least in the past.
Childcare.
Yeah,
What?
we have childcare. Yeah, that's how I met my future boss. We met in childcare and we're like, wow, it's so amazing.
You know what? I'm leaving Java and going to Kubernetes. This is
yeah, exactly.
like this. Look, y'all are my people. Fire.
I know.
Like
I know.
I'm
I knew the minute I joined, I knew it.
I am coming to the Linux like Kubernetes side. I don't know if I want to play with Kubernetes, but Linux, I'm all for it.
Yeah. So part of the idea there was like, all right, so we will do the best we can to get as many people packed into a KubeCon and OSS summits and stuff. That's like our mission. But also, if we could use the enthusiast market, the people who like their Steam Decks, they want to play with a Raspberry Pi with their mom, they can learn these skills using the same tools that we use, right? And use that as an on-ramp to get the people that are interested in getting jobs and doing this.
And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people get confused about in the website marketing material for uBlue and Bazzlight and everything, because you keep saying cloud native in it, and everyone's like, "What is cloud native about a Linux distro?"
Oh, that pisses off so many people. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's like but like the fact that like obviously containers are building the system, but people don't care about that, right? Like they care about like, how am I going to get work done, or how does this enable me to do something else? Because most people, they like pop open code and they're like, "There's nothing cloud native about this. It's just an editor. I'm just writing some code. I'm learning a couple things." What are the components there that like make that tie back in for you, where you're like, this is why we call it cloud native. This is what we're trying to encourage people to learn and do.
Right. Because you'll open VS Code and then you'll be like, all right, I'm ready to install Node. How do I install Node on this thing? You don't. Yeah. Right. So usually for developers that don't come from that cloud mindset, right, this is initially their friction. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to create the thing is with default Fedora, they make their own choices because they're trying to make a generic Linux distro, right? So it was very clear to my target audience. I was like, okay, if someone's the kind of person that would be interested in going to have a KubeCon, what tools would they use? So for 6 months, I was just walking around randomly. Hey, if someone were to give you the perfect Linux hookup, what does it look like, right? VS Code overwhelmingly, right, is the tool people use, although everyone's talking about Zed right now, and like, Zed installs awesome on Bluefin, by the way, and it's
just installed it yesterday.
Yeah, it's like perfect.
Yeah,
I started to get all the tools. Someone was like, I got to have Kind on there so I can have a cluster. People had to have Brew because all the cuddle tools for all the associated projects and stuff are all in Brew because our community are Mac people. Macs overwhelmingly are used in open source development, which is a topic for another day, but I want to help fix that. So as people were saying, it was like, well, I kind of have my own messed up way. And then, it's like, well, how would you teach your kid to do it? Oh, they're like, oh, yeah, just start them off this way. And then someone at some point was like, you need to talk to Craig Peters, who's the dev containers guy. I don't know if he's still the dev containers guy. And that's just a little snippet of JSON that you can put in your Git repo that defines your containers for you. And it's built into VS Code. JetBrains has support for it.
I love JetBrains so much. I am such a JetBrains stan.
Yeah, their toolbox tool is what we use to install it on a Bluefin system, and it works fantastic. It updates for you. It handles everything. So our challenge really has been developers who aren't used to that workflow to get them used to, you don't apt-get install Node and apt-get install MySQL, right? You have a file in your Git repo that says, I want from Ubuntu 2404, right? From MySQL : blah or whatever. And then you work with it in that way as the container first primitive. And that I would also say that's the thing that probably trips up people the most, that are developers, that some of them really don't want to change their bad habit. Well,
it's just it's a habit, right?
I call it a bad habit. Some people are going to say I make a living with that. Shut up. And I was like,
a traditional habit for sure. A traditional habit when you have a full like package manager and you have write access to the full system and the things that like make it unsafe to do upgrades, right? All the things that later on you're like, oh, this is going to bite me in a year when I have to upgrade the system or I have to reinstall.
Yeah, it's like installing Tech Live on your host. Like, don't do that.
Especially when like it starts like as not a huge problem when you have a few hosts, and then all of a sudden the more you scale, that bites you so hard later. Another thing I was thinking too is we have sometimes it's really hard when you're teaching like I teach military spouses through Male Spouse Coders, but I also work with rewriting the code in different like nonprofits to like teach like college students or kids and stuff. This would be great to teach people who are really new, but to do Linux. Like we did capture the flag with CLI, you know, and just trying to find creative ways to like help people learn Linux and to learn, you know, the skills that like you don't necessarily learn in college or through boot camps. Like they'll teach you how to code, but there's so many other skills that you really need. And I think this would be such a wonderful product to bridge that gap for the industry skills that you need.
I have someone I know that I'm encouraging them to learn how to code, just to be able to learn that skill. And they're like, I don't have a computer. Like I have my phone, I have a tablet. I don't have an actual computer. So I had an old, you know, Lenovo that I'm like, here's Bluefin. Like you don't care about any of that. So like here's a Linux, just like a computer with an editor. Go have at it. And I'm not worried about him breaking it. I'm not worried about him like you get a bunch of the tools out of the box. You're going to get those habits, but like you just need to go through some like free code camp for a little while. And you can ignore all that other stuff.
But see, we've learned that in this market, that's not enough. Not for you, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just like a lot of people will like, you can learn how to code, but when you get to be a developer from when you're usually using a code base that is really big and that you're adding to it too, there's a lot of little like skills that you need, like being able to work in Linux, being able to use the command line. So being able to teach these skills that you may not, like learning how to code is such a small part of being a developer, and learning all the little skills that go with it to make them more marketable candidates.
How to work as a team.
Yes. Well, see, most military spouses, they can solve some problems. Moms can solve problems, but a lot of like, we got to the point where people were like, during the COVID hiring, like everybody was willing to take a chance on people. And now it's getting to like, well, you don't have 30 out of the 30 skills. So now we can't hire you. We can't take a chance. So making sure that we're giving them a complete, like rounded skill set is really important. So I think this would be a great product to utilize.
And you totally hit the thesis statement, right? It's, we need you. We need your students in open source, like open source maintainership. Open source took over everything.
If you would like to do a partnership, I would love that, because we're trying to get them to contribute to open source, because it's a great way to learn real development and to be able to do like development as a team, right? Working with people around the world and being able to add and to like use version control and stuff, because that is another thing that is not taught, right? And just being able to work in a community and to be able to work remotely, but it's like, a lot of places won't give you a shot if you haven't done it before. Like open source can be very gatekeepy. So,
and going to the right open source, right? Because you can have a lot of people.
Dude, we are bringing a gang of Male Spouse Coders to scale because of that community. No, for real, because like they're kind and they're not going to judge them. Like it's so refreshing to like even talking to Garrett and just people there. Like you guys have been in tech for so long, but you're some of the kindest people who've been in tech for so long, you know? So it's like that community is so important.
My very first open source pull request was actually to Ubuntu.
Really?
Way back when I was in college. Yeah. It was denied. And they told me no. They're like, no, actually, we don't want this.
What was it? Do you remember?
I was updating SSH copy ID, the script that like copies your script, your
love
key
that
over.
tool.
It's a great tool, right? But like I kept doing it and I kept getting duplicates on the authenticated, and I was just like, oh, this will just remove the duplicates. Like it just looks at like, hey, is there a duplicate there? Don't add it. And if it's, not there, then add it. And so it's just like, it was like a 3-line bash, but like it took me 2 days to learn how to open an account for Launchpad, to be able to send the PR, to be able to like do all that other stuff. Like I fixed the thing for myself. I'm like, I want to contribute this back. And that was the very first time that I was like, I'm going to open source this thing. I'm going to contribute back to a thing that already exists. And it took like a week before anyone even saw it. And they're like, yeah, no, this doesn't make sense. It's not a big file. We're just going to write it twice. And they denied it. And I was heartbroken because I was just like, oh man, like that was such a bad taste of open source, because it wasn't and they didn't like, obviously like now I don't care. It was just like, oh, hey, it was a thing. I probably would also deny that looking back if someone contributed, but there was no feedback on it. There was no oh, let's talk about it. Like, no, like we don't want this. It's fine. It's closed.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like sometimes you got to tell people that the failure of something getting merged is still a win for you.
Yeah.
Like you're not learning. It's kind of like when F1 drivers race to learn experience, right? Like in your juniors, you don't care, like we're not judging your performance based on that. We're judging your ability to learn how to learn, and that's a thing. I think as we go into the second and third decade of open source, like in the big early days, Ubuntu in the early days, especially for me, like what was the groundbreaking thing in Ubuntu? We had a code of conduct. It was like one of the first big ones. And that's how far back we're talking about, right? So now imagine if we were to have that interaction today and you have GitHub templates, you have a bot that says, hey, welcome to your contribution. It adds the tags for you. I think a lot of us we want to be efficient, right? But I encourage maintainers to be less efficient when it comes to interacting with the community. Like sometimes it's like,
yes,
you could say thanks when you accept a pull request. Like there's a field there for a reason, like would it hurt to put a picture of your dog in there every once in a while? Like I try to encourage these kind of fun, happy, kind of bring the
humanity behind
the humanity
source, right?
Back into it. And, and bring some of the little humor, right? Like I have this coin that, Tom Spot Cowway gives to people, it says the strongest steel is forged in the fire of a dumpster. I just thought, hey, welcome to the project. It's a hot mess. You want to hang out and talk about Linux? And that's really like the value I think people are looking for, right? They want to see someone and they want access to someone,
I want to be a part of your project. I just think that is like, I wish people were more like that, whether it's like in business where you're like actually working as a developer or open source. Like if you want to not have to do so much work, you teach other people and allow other people to come in to spread that work. And if you're not welcoming, you're just taking on more and more work by yourself.
Before we go into the like how to get involved here, what's going on with the hardware support? Because you like have like an unofficial community distro for the framework laptop. You're like it's getting bigger and you're starting to get more places. If someone wants to install it, like where should they be installing stuff, or are there things they can just go buy?
Yeah, so we are an unofficial community supported option on the framework. We get to work with those folks. I got to meet them at OSS Summit. Matt Hartley's been a Linux person in the community for at least as long as I have, over 20 years. And when I found out that framework was very interested in, they outright are just saying it. In the beginning, they were like, we may do Linux or not. But now as time goes on, they're like, we want to offer a Linux that's an alternative to Macs, right? But we want to do it in a sustainable way with hardware that brings the cost down from everyone, commodity stuff. And as a Linux nerd, that just lines up with everything that I want, And I think by now we've realized that we can't get there with a traditional operating system Linux distribution. That model just has failed for so long that like people have, sometimes I try Linux again. I promise it's getting better. But when you have that hardware, it removes so much uncertainty from it that like I've been rocking Bluefin on my framework as my work laptop for over a year now, and it shreds. It is the best Unix system I've ever used. Modulo battery life, but hardware gets better over time, and Mac M3s are fantastic products, right? Like the bar continues to raise. So it's just not good enough for Linux to be an alternative. We have to offer something else, right? Which is why we're also investing in the software part, the sustainability of the people, right? Where it's like, if we could tie it all in together and kind of like a narrative that's about you figuring out what you want out of technology at a time where more and more control of our systems are being taken away from us, right? I feel like the market is kind of ready for a little bit of an alternative reality. I've tried both monopolies and mobile, right? Like, and at some point you want to go back, but that doesn't mean I want to go back to compiling kernels and things like that. And I want to take that success that Linux has had in the rest of the industry and help that to catch up to desktop so that we have something that we could be proud, that I can give my kid. Because I can give my kid a Chromebook. I cannot give my kid a traditional Linux. And that's really what we want to fix. And if we can do that in a way that helps people get into the industry and gets them into open source and mint more people like y'all, that's how we help solve sustainability in open source and all computing. That's my pitch for sustainability.
I also think it's interesting when they came out with the AI in a lot of the laptops that they're releasing now, and everyone was like, we're all running to Linux. This makes Linux more accessible. So it's like,
the amount of work that like Steam did with the Steam Deck and putting Linux and Proton into gaming, and the amount of garbage that Apple and Microsoft have been putting into their operating systems has been coming up to this head of like, actually Linux is really good for a lot of things. And even the last 2 years, every developer survey you go look at, Stack Overflow, GitHub, they both have developer surveys. Linux is the number one used OS.
Can you imagine once it gets good?
Right. This is people struggling with it. This isn't like this is people finding some old machine and Yeah,
because I think people go into you're never going to replace Photoshop. I was like, okay, well, don't replace Photoshop then. Why don't you handle my local university has pallets of old computers they're trying to get rid of, that they can run Kubernetes. Absolutely they can. Modern hardware can, run Kubernetes. So and on the AI thing, I think is very interesting because Bluefin does ship AI tools.
Yep.
But you're going to get Olama and you're going to do it locally and you're going to use open weighted models and you can pull from everyone. And there's a little GTK app that gives you the ChatGPT experience.
But see, that makes me excited because now you're also the fact that you said you can get old computers, that means it's accessible for the next person to learn and for someone to be able to start off without spending. I always get the questions, do I need to spend $1,000 on a MacBook to be a developer? No, you don't.
No.
But stuff like this is going to make it even more accessible for somebody and give you those options. So that just makes me excited because I'm all about trying to get people in tech and to get different perspectives and, help people learn. And I love that.
I love it. Now we just got to finish the thing for you.
George,
it always feels like it's never finished. It's been good enough for a while, but you know how it is, Justin. It's my baby. I want every that brew thing that you were like, that's not a big deal. It constantly bothers me.
Yeah, that's how it is though. That's because it's your baby.
That's totally
and as far as I know, you're the only distro that ships with brew.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's a fantastic competitive advantage because distributions are incentivized to have you use their package ecosystems. And I'm done with package ecosystems. I love that stuff for work, which is why when I need Ubuntu 24.04 from Ubuntu 24.04 in a container, and then my host remains clean and I get the latest stuff from Brew. It's all from GitHub. Everything is automated. They're adding all the SIG source stuff. So you'll be able to verify that it's built in. It's just really nice to just bolt on to what the rest of the industry is doing and use that to make my Linux desktop better. And that's what we concentrate on.
So where do people get involved? Where do they get started?
Well, you can go to universal-blue.org or projectbluefin.io or bazite.gg. Depending on whether you're a gamer or interested in base images, we're always looking for people. You don't have to know Linux if you know ops stuff, if GitHub Actions.
I keep telling people that are like, I need to get experience. I'm like, go find an open source community. A lot of them run infrastructure and they will give you the experience, right? You can show up for Kubernetes as a SIG for infrastructure. Fedora does, Nix does, all these people run infrastructure, the open source, and they want more volunteers. Go find the community, go show up to a couple meetings and say, hey, I can take that issue. If someone could walk me through it, guarantee you someone will say yes, I will help you take over that.
Yeah. And we keep everything Bash and there's a little bit of Python there. We purposely ensure because the end product is a stamped thing. So it doesn't matter how you make it. Right. So there's some people that are like, oh, this is just a bunch of Bash. And I'm like, exactly. I don't need to learn.
It runs the world. It's fine.
It does.
I don't need to learn Nix to install Vim. I could just use Bash for that. So we purposely keep it low, and then people just hang out. There's some people just show up to hang out with the other video gamers, right? Because they have those devices and they're talking about getting every last frame per second out of it. So there's a community of just hot rodders that might not even contribute. They're just I ran the game today on this new version and I got 5 FPSs more than I did yesterday. Just letting you know, that kind of hot rod vibe is what we're looking for. And
your Discord is crazy active.
Yeah.
You have so much stuff going on in Discord. I can never keep up.
Yeah. We just crossed 8,000 and fortunately or unfortunately, the rate of acceleration is going. Bazite finally found its spot, I think, now that we are enabling the Asus devices and the Legion Goes and all these are come out because it's just Linux nerds figuring out stuff. So it's opened up a new audience. We don't get a lot of coverage from Linux YouTubers and things like that, but we do get a lot of coverage from gaming channels that may not be Linux channels, but mention the occasional Steam Deck news. And that's the audience we want. We want new people. Arch users, what you want already. I'm not trying to convert you. So that's the spiel. And give it a shot. Find a laptop, and always happy to help, especially if you have experience in developer stuff, developer relations, putting together bundles of, I would love to have a better story for data scientists that includes better tools, things like that. So if you're deep in the industry, you can help out just by telling me what to ship.
I love that you're actually listening to your audience, though, because some people just want to build something cool and then they just don't listen to any other opinions.
Yeah, you want to listen to your audience. We generally don't listen to generic Linux people, right? Because if you ask people, they'll just ask for a better horse, So, we do take some choices that are opinionated, but it worked for Kubernetes, so.
George, thanks so much for coming on the show today and for talking to us all about uBlue and all the distros, non-distros, the flavors of things that you're building over there.
Yeah, the custom images. Yeah.
Yeah. I have been a fan for a little while, and I hope to see more people coming into it. So
yeah, it's really awesome, and I hope you find it all useful. And if not, it'll just get better over time. Open source is the slow march of progress continues.
All right, thanks so much.
What's up, friends? I'm here in the breaks with my good friend, my new friend, Kyle Spearin, the creator of Bitwarden, the open source password manager you know and love. And now they have secrets management for businesses, for developers, for you, for your infrastructure, for all the things. So Kyle, I know that Bitwarden has deep roots. Take me to the beginning. How did you begin this thing?
The early stages of Bitwarden came from me wanting to create something that was really easy to use so that lots of people could adopt it and use it, but also appeal to people who are like-minded like myself, who really like the open source message and the benefits of open source technology and what that brings to the market. Fast forward several years of kind of doing that, there was a lot of untapped potential too in the product. But there's a lot of things I don't, have strengths in, and where I thought I could bring in outside help to help me. And I helped develop that over the course of several years of running the product and build those right relationships with the right people. And then once I was ready to kind of accept that help, I brought people in and we really took the business to the next level of where it could be. And now we have, millions and millions and millions of users using our product today. And we have multiple products that we really service the kind of security industry with.
Okay, so now you've scaled, you've got millions and millions and millions of users deep into password management, and you've scaled the team, you've scaled the product, you've scaled the company, and now you have secrets management for teams, for infrastructure, for all the things. What are some of the key concerns that made you go this direction?
There's a sprawl of secrets for, think about how large your environment is and all the things and all the endpoints and machines you have to manage to kind of orchestrate and make this whole thing work, right? Like there are tools that help you do all that, but all those tools are using secrets in different ways, right? You end up with this sprawl of secrets that are everywhere, much like the sprawl of secrets you have in password management of all the services you use on the internet. It's kind of overwhelming. Like I think a lot of people, if you would ask how many different passwords or secrets that you have that you kind of use across the internet, if I had to bet, almost all of them would underestimate the value that they actually are. And once you understand the depth of the sprawl you have, it's a challenge to figure out how you're going to do that and what tool you're going to find to kind of manage that. In addition to the sprawl, there's also the sprawl of your organization itself, the human element of it as well, which, at every company, there are people who come and there are people who go, and there are people who need access to certain secrets and there are people who don't need access to other secrets. And that's also a very challenging problem to solve. Part of the core feature set of what Bitwarden Secrets Manager is solving are those two problems. How do you manage from a single pane of glass all the secrets you need to use throughout your environments and infrastructure? And then how do you control who has access to those secrets in a kind of least privilege access way that creates the best security practices that you need to secure your organization?
Okay, get streamlined secrets management for developers at bitwarden.com/secrets. Get end-to-end encrypted Bitwarden Secrets Manager. Secure your infrastructure, your machine secrets, and your developer secrets. Start a free 7-day Bitwarden Secrets Manager trial today at bitwarden.com/secrets. That's bitwarden.com/secrets.
Thank you so much, George, for coming on the show and talking to us all about Bluefin and Bazzite and uBlue and what you're doing with a modern Linux distro. I've been running Linux on my computers since I believe it was 2002. 2002 is when I got my first computer. So yeah, that was when I started running a Linux distro, because it was an old computer from an old company and it didn't run Windows ME or 2000 at the time. So I installed, I don't remember what I installed. It was Knoppix for a little while, which is just live CD. Anyway, I've been using the uBlue stuff. I had a fork of it myself. I actually have a couple videos of getting started with Bazzite and Bluefin on my YouTube channel because I've been involved with it. Really friendly folks. I have some PRs into it. It's a lot of fun. I just want to spread it to more people because I think it's great.
I think it's great, and the community seems great. So I'm very excited about this.
Yes, it's a lot of people that came over from Kubernetes, at least the people that I was involved with. And so if you like the Kubernetes community, you're probably going to like this community too.
Look, Kubernetes, I don't know if I want to run it, but the community is fire. So maybe this is my in. I'm going to go do Linux stuff that I can get with.
There you go. So for today's outro, Autumn and I have a couple links to share and talk about and just go over. And I'll go first with mine just because it's a really short one, where in the year of 2024, when you think that a lot of the things that we've learned lessons from to not do on the internet would kind of be done with, and plenty of
wow.
there's plenty of things that, like, you used to see happen and you're like, wow, why would that ever happen that way? Someone found that at TSA at the airports, right? Like the
oh wow, this just keeps getting worse.
All the pilots and staff and crew people, they go through their own line, right? Like they all work there. They don't have to go through the TSI line. They're checked out. So they're ready to go. That system is called KCM, known crew member. And apparently it's also just like available on the internet. And someone found out that it's also vulnerable to SQL injection.
Okay, but low key though, there's so many things that are vulnerable to SQL injection, and people just pretend like, oh, that's like beginner level. And I'm like,
and that is exactly this beginner level. Because if you've ever done SQL injection, the very first thing they're going to tell you to do, like, have you ever done it before?
I've done it in hacking classes in school, and it was very, very fun.
Yeah, and you're just like, this works? Like, how is this possible? And so, like, the
put
first...
some characters in there. And do
the first thing they usually tell you to do is, like a single quote, space, or, and then number 1 equals 1, right? They're like, hey, like, just trick SQL and say, like, hey, if the password didn't match, or 1 equals 1, get me in. And that's exactly what worked on this website.
Okay, but we've been like literally saying this for years. It's never a super fancy security attack. No, it's always like people will always be like, oh, well, that like we've already accounted for all these things. And it's like, that's beginner stuff. And I'm like, that's how they get it every time.
All of the fancy scanners and all that stuff, and then just like the very basics of like open up your certified hacker manual and you're like, let me just type in these characters, and you're like, oh, I'm in.
Not even certified hacking manner, like the first 3 days in any security class, like my whole
sanitize your inputs, folks.
Yes.
Sanitize your inputs.
Like there's sanitizers that are so easy, like it's just not that hard. And I was reading a thing on Linux, not on Linux, but on LinkedIn, and it was like, what do you recommend people put in their like Java code? And I'm like, check for injections. Like, they think that things are so complicated, but like sometimes it's always like they walked right in the front door, guys.
Right. And it's not even like, oh, I had to like, reverse engineer something, or I had to like go convince someone with a phishing attack to give me their credentials. Like, no, like it's just like a field that I filled out. And I just filled it out with something that was different than what you expected. And that was it. My
son's dad and him, they were putting his new password on his new Chromebook, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's like, no! It's like, guys, stop it.
Yeah. So I would just share that one. I also found it interesting, of course, that being a large corporation of TSA, like they wouldn't let them write this up, and they kept telling them to take it down, and they kept denying the fact. So there's all this like politics of like,
okay, but TSA, I feel like should be like on it,
right? Like this
like,
is
okay. Like we make you make us take our shoes off.
I got global entry this year for the first time. Like I signed up for global entry before the COVID happened in 2019, but I didn't have an appointment, and then everything shut down for 4 years. And so I got it when I came back into the country, and I didn't have to take off my shoes the last time I traveled. And I was like, oh, this is why it's fancy for people. I didn't have to take my laptop out of my bag. I was like, okay, that was worth the $70 right there. I'm going to take like 5 flights a year, and I'd leave my shoes on.
You fancy rich tech people.
$70. It was a time thing. Yeah, but I definitely was like, I'm never going to use this. This is a waste of money. And absolutely, I flew twice.
And then it changed your life, and then you're over here like, I'm never going back.
Yeah, it wasn't even the shorter line. It was like, oh, I didn't have to unpack everything. And I travel with more computers than most people should. Because I got my Steam Deck, I got my laptop, I got my iPad, I got my Kubernetes cube. I'm just like, just let me leave it all in the bag.
You really take the cube with you?
If I'm going for demos, yeah.
I love you so
It has
much.
A Pelican case and everything.
It
I
really?
had to unpack it. Yeah. I had to unpack it last time, and I was just like, all the cables and power supply, and it was, TSA pre-check or global entry was fantastic for that.
I think you need it more than anyone does.
So what do you got? What link you have for this week?
So mine is YubiKey's cryptographic flaw. Let attackers clone devices by extracting private keys. So some security researchers were testing the YubiKeys and looking for vulnerabilities. And apparently the YubiKeys Series 5 has a vulnerability that lets you clone the device and extract the keys stored, which is like, how many huge enterprises do you know use YubiKeys? Like, that is wild. And it's a side channel exploitation, which is like, just wow. Like, it's just, this is such an interesting way to, like, you're using a YubiKey to be more secure, and then there's such a huge vulnerability in the YubiKey, which is just, it just shows that we keep getting better, and then there's new ways to like do crazy security things.
I love side channel attacks of just like, hey, I looked at how long it took to process that command versus this command, and now I have your secret key. Like,
that is just it's like such a creative way. Like, you're almost like,
props. Yeah, you earned that one. Right? Like,
it's like the dude who did the back door into the, like, and that like got himself to be an open source maintainer. Like, you were like, that was wrong, but like, also like, it was so creative. I almost gave you props, but like, bad, don't do that. But like,
well, and we recently talked about the RSA hack, right? Like, that was, I don't remember, a few weeks ago from this recording. But yeah, like, they literally, they hacked into RSA to go get the secret keys off of the server and all this stuff. And then someone's over here with like a YubiKey, and they're like, I have physical access to this. I can do whatever I want. And now I could just like see all the processing and all this other stuff. And what was the Heartbleed? Like, the very first like big Heartbleed CVE that like I think made people aware that CVEs existed was like, oh, I'm just going to read memory outside of where you think I'm reading, and you're going to send me your private key eventually.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, like, yeah, it's not even a side channel. It's just like, oh, just give me more information. That wasn't it. Give me some more.
I feel like side channels are so interesting because they're like a roundabout way that you wouldn't think about it. Like how we were just saying, like, most of them are walking right through the like front door. Side channels actually like a really creative, interesting way to go about it, you know, that you wouldn't necessarily think is a way for someone to hack you, which it's just, I'm just like chef's kisses on like creativity.
I don't remember if it was a white paper. What I read, it was the how to hear into a room of people using a laser.
Oh, wow.
Like, you shine a laser at a window, and the vibrations of what they're saying inside the room vibrate the window, and then you can read back the laser timing to reverse engineer what they are saying inside the room with a laser, not a microphone, you looking at the laser and measuring the light.
See, that is. Should you do these things? No. Is that absolutely creative and like I almost want to high five you? Yes.
That is just straight up like Hollywood level, like, oh, I don't believe that. And then someone's out there doing it. And you're just like, oh, okay.
Like, you shouldn't go and steal information, but you almost deserved it after. Like, you know, like, dang, like, I just, wow. Like, props, dude.
Yeah. And the YubiKey thing too is like, hardware is hard.
It is so hard.
And like, not only do you have to like get people new YubiKeys that aren't vulnerable to this, but also a lot of them are like, you need to input those into a system for like centralized management and all this other, like, it's not just a mail you out a YubiKey from Amazon.
Not just that, but you tell people that, like, hey, this is bad, and it's always going to be people who take forever to switch out their hardware. They're going to be like, oh, I have to like reprogram it, and like it's just that's going to, in the amount of people that use these in enterprise settings is going to be such a pain. I feel bad for those IT departments in advance.
Yeah, but also like I don't know, like how you can't fight against those things in the future, and nothing is secure today.
That's what I'm saying. This is actually creative. Like, wow, how do you solve this problem type of deal? And like for it to be a whole Series 5, like that is a lot of YubiKeys.
I gotta look at my YubiKeys now. I don't know. But also like these are targeted attacks, right? Like someone has to be able to like
physically get your key. And if someone wants to like get into a lot of systems, if they're targeting one person or one organization, I don't know. I've read so many stories that's just like they're getting in. Like I don't know how to do this stuff. But it's just wild. Like just people are, when somebody is sitting there and they're thinking about different ways to do something and they have enough time and they have enough expertise, it is amazing what people will come up with.
If you have the resources,
yes,
like there's not a lot you can't do.
Especially now that you can learn so much online for free. It's amazing.
But also we encourage people, go learn more stuff online.
Ethical hacking, people. Ethical.
Come to Scale and go to the CTF. There's a CTF at Scale every year, and it's a fantastic way to learn things. And even if you're not participating, like my first CTF, I did nothing. I didn't get any flags. I watched people, and I'm like, how'd you use that tool? What was that thing you just did? And I was like, I look at the leaderboard, and I go watch over their shoulder, and it was a fantastic way to learn.
Sometimes that's the best way to learn, because sometimes just to get the context that you need to start contributing and
just to know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
You're just like, what is the world of this? And you can get that from people watching over the shoulder, or you can get it from something like uBlue, and where we just bake in a lot of those defaults and we say, this is probably better.
I'm so excited about that product.
Thanks everyone for listening to the show. We've been getting a lot of feedback, and we appreciate people sending feedback, hearing it on Reddit, in email, comments on episodes. This has been great just to hear from the community. Also, like our Slack channel is wonderful community. Again, people just supporting everyone else in the channel has been awesome to see. Thank you so much everyone for doing that. I am getting through a backlog of some of the requests for things. We have some people scheduled, but there are some more requests of people that want topics. I need to go back through and reply to a lot of those, but we are scheduling more people. We have probably a couple months already scheduled out, and so we're getting to it. But keep sending the feedback. Email us at shipit@changelog.com if you want something on a topic on the show. You can suggest a episode or topic through the websites. There's a little like suggest button, and that's some of the stuff that I'm still learning how to do this podcasting stuff, especially in a way that has more features than my last podcast that I ran in 2007. Which was just me with a microphone and Audacity. So it's wonderful to hear from the community, and we thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you again next week. 3, 2, 1.
Thanks for listening to Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash. During the month of September, we're trading free changelog sticker packs for thoughtful 5-star reviews or blog posts about Ship It. Simply send proof of your review to stickers@changelog.com alongside your mailing address, and we'll send those stickers to your mailbox anywhere in the world. Let's do this. Thanks once again to our partners at Fly.io, to our Beat Freak in residence, Breakmaster Cylinder, and to our longtime sponsors at Sentry. Use code CHANGELOG when you sign up for a Sentry team plan and save yourself $100. That's almost 4 free months. That is all for now, but come back next week to continue discussing everything that happens after Git Push.